Good evening yet again. It is Alex, and I'm going to go ahead and continue our lessons on building a WinForm application. We left off on creating our controls, just our outline of our user interface. We're also going to need another user interface for modals. We're going to have a user interface. If you remember in a couple of the previous videos here, that our user interface, when you click the share button, and actually I need to enter an item, and when you click the share button, we've got this modal that pops up that allows you to email. We've also got another modal that allows you to update an item as well. So here's a modal form here. So I just thought about this. I could give that a different name. And so we've got two more forms that we're going to come up with. And if you look, this particular form looks very similar to what we're already capturing. So it's very similar. So let's go ahead and close this application here. And what we're going to do is we're going to come over here to our grocery application project. We're going to right click and say add form. We're going to give our form a name. So let's just call it update item, something like that, and say add. And we want our fields to look very similar to what we have here. So let's just do some copying of these three. Actually, let's do some copying of all of these buttons, and let's see if this works here. Copy that and paste that over here. And look at there, it worked. So we've got our form there. And then we can come over here in our toolbox and create another panel. Drag and drop that over here. We're going to drag and drop and select that one. Oh, let's see if we can't just select this right here. Boom. Drag it into there. We'll make our panel a little bit bigger. And then what we'll do is we will drag and make our smaller form smaller. Our form a little smaller. Save that. And then we'll give these labels some names. So we've got an item name already, item price, quantity, our checkbox that we need to make taxable, add item, remove item, and update item buttons. So we've got that form created. We'll make one more form. So we'll right click over here and say add form. We're going to call this one our email form. Email form. Say add here. And then as we know, we've got, if we launch our other application again, we'll click share. We've just got two emails. So we've got an email box and two buttons on there. Let's close that. So what we can do is we can open up, or we can just copy parts of another form here. So we'll just copy this here, copy that, and paste that over there. We'll change the text and say to email, something like that. make this form a little bigger. We'll have to play around with the size of the maximum size of our form here, because our max length is 25 and we want to make that probably 50. Emails can be larger. And then we need 2 buttons, so let's just copy a couple of these buttons here, copy that, paste that. We'll drag that over here, drag one over here, make the, uh-oh, I didn't mean to do that. I got a little overzealous and double clicked on there and created a handler. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there and remove that handler for right now. Okay, I think we're okay. Unclick that. Come back over here. I'm going to make these 2 buttons the same size. So we'll drag him over here. He's on the same plane. He's got enough spacing. Drag that up there. And instead of it saying add, this is, instead of our add item, this is our cancel button, in case they don't want to send an email. And instead of it saying add, it's going to say cancel. And this one over here is going to say send email, or send. Let's just put send on there. And then up in this button here, we're going to call that button send email button. And this is not going to be item name anymore. This is now going to be email. So we're good there. Alrighty. We'll close that for now. And we'll go back to our form here. So we've got all our forms there. And instead of these item names here, let's see what we got on our application again. We have 3 form labels. Actually, we have 3 labels here and 3 labels here. Total items, taxable items, and subtotal. Let me actually just do this. Let me just make a print of that. And then I'll just come in here and just paste that in there. That way we can refer back to that. Yes, I want to exit. Okay, so now we want our one label here to say, we'll make that one, it seems a little bit bigger. We'll make it 14 font. We'll get rid of the others. Copy, paste, paste. And then what we'll do, this one will say total items. This one will say taxable items. And this one will say subtotal. Let's line it up here. Boom. And boom. Let's get that one there and that one there. Okay. Now these, let's move them down just a smidge. Make some more copies here, because this is going to be our total items. And that font will be the same size, and the text will automatically be a 0. Same thing here. that one will be our taxable items. And then our subtotal, we'll make that subtotal. That's the name, remember, property. And then the text property will be set to $0.00 because it's a money value. And so now we've got our total fields there. And we can play around with where they are located at if I want to make them right in the middle there. Save that, save our work. We launch this to see how it kind of looks. And there we go. Tab, 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 tab. Yep, there we go. We can tab through all of our fields and everything else. All right. Now, a couple of things we're going to do first. Well, next, I should say, is we're going to lock down our form here. We don't want anybody to resize this form. So there's a couple of selections here that we want to mess around with. We want to lock the form. So we say true to locked. And then the next one we want to mess around with up here. Is it this control box here? I can't remember. I'll have to look. So if I click start, we can resize the form still, which we don't want. I know that that's that one there. Up maximize box, we want to say false there. Say save that. Let's try that now. Yeah, we can still do that. So we've got rid of the maximize box there. We still have a cancel box there. And then over here, there's a control box as well. We want to put that one to false. Run that, and that disappears. We can still resize it because we want the button to control whether or not we can close the form or not. And then there's one other that I cannot remember for the life of me here. Let's see here. I'm looking here. I'm looking. Up there it is. Form border style. We want to say fixed dialog, is it? I think. Yep, that's it. And we'll have to resize a little bit to make it look a little bit neater. So let's undo what we just did there. Where'd you go? There you are. Form border style. Change that to sizable. Nope. Fix dialog. And then go down to locked and say false. Let's give it a little bit of margin there. And say true. Now let's launch it. We should have a little bit more. There we go. A little bit more area there. So now they can't click on, they can only click on the buttons. They can't resize anything. They can't drag and drop stuff around. So we lock that down. Now you'll notice that in doing that, we lost the ability to click up here and close it. So we have to have a button to do the close there for us. So let's do that real quick. That's going to be the easy peasy part. So in a previous video, I talked a little bit about event handling, and that's this one right here. So event handling is going to handle anything, anytime a button is clicked or a text box is filled out, that's an event. It's something that's happening, and what we want is we want our program to handle what happens when one of those events happens. So our event that we want to handle is when they click this close box. So let's just double click on this close box, and what will happen in Visual Studio it will automatically create an event handler method for us. So if I double click on here, it's called closed form click. Now, one thing that I would recommend as you are starting to get into the code behind aspect of the Windows form, keep all of your code that acts or does the same thing organized together. How do you do that? Well, what I do is I like to create regions, or basically folder tabs, basically, and then put all of the code that kind of acts similarly in that region. So, for example, this is a constructor, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So I'm going to come up here right below the instantiation of my class called main form, which inherits from the form class. And right here at the opening curly brace, I'm going to put an enter or a blank line there. And I'm going to start to type with the pound, and I'm going to start typing the word region, R-E-G-I-O-N. And you'll notice as I start typing it, it says there's a code snippet for it. What code snippets are is if you double tab, it will automatically fill out stuff for you. There we go. And so here's a region, and you can give these regions names. So this region I'm going to call Constructors. And everything that's in there can be hidden. So I can come down here and I'm going to drag. You can either drag and drop. I use a lot of keyboard shortcuts. So I'm going to drag and drop that region down there. Get rid of the blank lines there and put a blank line here. So now what happens is you'll notice that you have the ability to collapse this area. And that keeps all of your code in one area. So the next one here, since we're talking about event handling here, I'm going to put another region in here. Oh, sorry. Pound region. And I'm going to call this event handlers. Now I'm just going to keyboard shortcut. So when I go to double click all of these and create event handlers for all of these, they'll be in this same area right here. So I don't have to go looking for an event handler. I know where they all are, and I can make my code neater that way. So one of the things that in a previous video on my channel here, I talked a little bit about inheritance. And so what inheritance allows you to do, inheritance allows you to do, is it allows you to inherit in a derived class from a parent class. So the form class is my parent class to this main form class. And so if I right click on this form class and I say go to definition, I'll see all of the different methods, all of the different properties, and everything else that are in here that I can inherit from. Now, this is the beauty of using object-oriented programming, because somebody at Microsoft has already created all of these, and I don't have to redo all of these all myself. So I just inherit automatically from the form class into this main form class. This is my derived or my child class. And so what's going to happen is everything in the form class I can use in my derived class, just about. So one of the things that I can use in the form class is a method called close. And what close does is it does exactly what you think it does. It closes a form and shuts it down. So I'm going to say, I can say it one or two ways. I can say this, which is this main form that I'm on, dot close. And it's a method, so I want to put the opening and closing parenthesis in there in a semicolon. Or I can just say close, like that. So now I have, if I save this, I have an event handler on my close form button. So if I click start and I click the close button, it should close my form. Boom. There we go. Now, if you remember on my form, when I click the close button, I've got some stuff that pops up and asks them if they want to exit. That's just a message box button. And so what that is, it's a notification type that you use with handlers to notify end user and make them aware of something. So we're going to put that in here as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to call in the message box class, and we're going to say dot show, which is a method. And then what we're going to do, let me go back for a second as I start typing. IntelliSense makes this so much easier. Message box, and I'm going to hit the tab key, dot show, hit the tab key, and when I hit Shift 9 to open my parenthesis, it automatically puts one in there. Now, what happens here is that since this is called polymorphism, this is a method called show, and you see there's these 21 drop downs here. This is polymorphism. It's the same method, but it has different forms of the same method. So we've got a form that I can just pass text into. We've got a form that I can pass a text and caption, buttons and stuff into. So we're going to use one of those other ones. We're not going to use the string one. So we're going to select show. And we're going to just hit the down arrow to get to the one that we want. What we want is this one right here. So what this does is it allows us to put the text that a person will see. It allows us to put a caption on the actual pop-up box at the top in the upper left-hand corner. And then these are the buttons that we want to show on the form. So we can type that in. And our text said, do you want to exit? And we'll hit comma because it tells us what our form is of this particular method. We've got a string that is a caption that's a string. We're going to say exit grocery app, comma. And this message box buttons is an enumerator. What an enumerator does is it gives enumeration values to common, I don't know how to explain that. It gives you like numeric values or enumerated values to common selections. So you don't have to guess what they are. So let me just type that in here. So message box buttons. See, we've got an enumerator there, and they're constants. And if I hit period, so you'll see that this is okay. That equates to a 0. Yes, no equates to a 1. 4, I mean. Yes, no, cancel is a 3. Okay, cancel is a 1. Abort, retry, ignore, and so on and so forth. So I want to use yes, no, which is a 4. And then all I do is put my semicolon there. And so now, for right now, we can run this and we can get this message box to pop up when we click this button. Do you want to exit? Yes or no? And no matter what we do, it's going to automatically close because we're not conditionalizing our close based on anything. So let's do that. We want to find out what a person chose in this, which one they chose, yes or no. So what we can do is this show returns a result. So we can create a variable using an implicit variable creation. We're going to call this selection equals. And so what's going to happen is if I click my breakpoint there and I say start, and I click close and I say yes, if we hover over selection, it shows us what they chose. Yes, right there. And this is a type of a dialog result selection. So what we need to do is we need to conditionalize our close based on if they say yes or no. If they say, yeah, I want to exit, then we want to perform this line of code. If they say, no, I don't want to exit, well, we don't want to exit. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a conditional. So far we've talked a little bit about event handling. And one thing that I didn't put in here was conditionals. Let me put conditionals in here. So we talked a little bit about classes and event handling. I'll put a red in there since we've just talked about it a little bit. And so now we're going to conditionalize. Put a red in there too. We're going to conditionalize our output or our closing of our method of our form, I apologize, based on if they say yes or no. So let's do a conditional if selection dot toString, because we have to remember this is not a string, it's a dialog result selection. It's a dialog result. So we need to get the string out of that. And we're going to say equals yes. Put a curly brace there. Now what we could do is we could do it this way as well. If selection equals message box buttons dot yes. No, we can't do that one. We'll just do it the way we were going to do it. Okay, dot toString equals yes. Then we want to do this. Save our code. Say start. Click close. And if they say no, we stay on the form. If they say yes, we exit the form. So we performed our first event handler function, or method, I should say. We've done our first bit of event handling in our form. Now, let's do something else here that's geared around the data entry aspect of it. So if we click start right now, we can put numbers and stuff in there and we run out of space here, right? What we can do is we can do this one of two ways. We can limit what a person puts in there by using different functionality and classes like regular expressions and stuff like that. In our item price in here, we can actually do some other stuff as far as making sure there's only numbers in there and so on and so forth. But let's do this. Let's put some default values in here right away. And we're not going to use the properties over there like we did before. So what we want to do is when this form loads, we want to actually have some default values in here. How do we do that? Well, the form, when it launches, it actually has its own event handling capability too, and it's called Formload. So just like we did with our buttons, we can click anywhere on the form, the actual form, we can double click anywhere there, and it will create a handler for us called Formload, just like that. And let me put a couple of extra, sorry. What's going on here? Uh-oh. My keyboard started acting up there. Okay. Let's put a couple of extra things here. Let's move you down there. And we can actually put them in the right order. So let's put Mr. Formload up there because he's the first one that's going to fire off. So to access the property or the actual property of this item name text box that we have here, these same properties over here are accessible in our code behind. So how would we do that? Well, we've got a name of our actual text box here. So I wonder what happens if we type in the word item name. Let's do it. Item name. Well, there it is. And it shows that it's a text box in our main form. So, like I said just a second ago, all of these properties over here, we should be able to access in our code behind. So the one we want to mess around with is this text one here. So let's dot text. Well, there it is right there. And since we're assigning a value to the text box field, we don't want to use an equality operator. We want to use an assignment operator. So that's just one equal sign. And so we're going to make item name have default value. And since they're all string fields, we're going to just go through and do this rather quickly. Copy that. We're going to say item name, item price, item quantity. And then our last one was taxable. And it's not that one. It's what do we call that checkbox? Did we give that checkbox a name? We did not. Let's give it a name. We're going to call it taxable. Just call it that. Taxable. And we'll say taxable. Now, taxable is different because it only has two states. It's got true or false, yes, no, on, off, checked or unchecked. So there's no text in there that we have to, put in there for the actual property itself. So what we're going to do is we're going to say dot checked is false because it's a Boolean value. Boolean meaning true or false. So once we've done this, we'll save our work real quick. And let's put some values in here. So we're going to say enter item here. The price, we're going to put $sign. No, we're going to put all just zeros. Zero. Uh-oh. I think I hit insert here. There we go. 0.00. And quantity is going to be just 0. And we'll save that. And we'll debug it. And look at there. We've got actual items in there now. And our checkbox is not checked. Let's close our form. Now let's change this to a true and see how that acts. It should be checked when we run this. And look at there, it's checked. But we're going to set it to a false. But I just wanted you all to see that. All right. Now, one of the things that I like to do is stuff like this that you may use more than once. I don't put that code in just one area. What I like to do is I like to put that in another area so I can call on it more than once. And I'm going to create a region for that. Call it worker methods. And I'm going to create a method there. Copy that code. And I'm going to create a method called initialize. And what that's going to do is every time I call initialize, it's going to reset any values that are in those fields to this right here. So what I'm going to do is make this a private void and call it initialize. Put my curly braces there, paste that stuff in there. Now I can get rid of this and then just call it initialize. Like that. So if the form launches, it'll call initialize. If I have other methods that we're going to create later, I can call initialize and they'll automatically reset everything to what you see here. So let's just kind of test that logic out here. Instead of us using the close form, let's create, let's save our work here first. Let's create a, let's double click on this add, because we're going to have to do that anyway. And like we did with, we'll minimize that one. We'll just move this one up here in our worker methods. And since it's our first button, we'll put it dir, initialize. We'll call it initialize there. And so what'll happen is we're going to have to call that there anyway. So what's going to happen is when I launch this, let's say I type some stuff in here. Type stuff in here. And I click add, it reverts it back to what it was. So it clears it out. The only difference is what we're going to do is when we call this initialize method in here, we're going to call this, it's going to be called at the end of all the code above. And let's put a to-do on this one. That's just a task. It's a reminder that we have something to do there. And you can look up all the to-dos in our task list and they'll show up here. So anytime you've got something that you want to do and you're not quite ready to do it, use a to-do and it'll show up there. You can go back to them. So we've added a couple of methods here. Let's see here. And let's make another worker method down here. So what we need to do is we need to figure out how to collect information in this form and store it. That's one of the first things we need to look at. We're gonna make it. We have to make a table, and it's got to have items, quantity, tax indicator, and the price. Okay. So we need to make a table. Well, how do you do that? Well, in C# and other programming languages, you can create tables interior in at design and runtime. Up in here, what we're going to do is we're going to call it a data table. Data table. Data table. And actually, let's do it this way. I learned this professionally here. Some of the folks I work with. So what you can do is you can separate your duties and not make all of your code stay in one area. I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call it data access objects, or DAO for short. And what that means is all of my data access, where all my data is kept and all that kind of stuff, all of my methods that goes to where my data is located at is going to reside in here. So when I want to add a new table, I want to delete rows from a table, I want to update a table, I want to create tables, it's going to all reside in a class inside of this data access object. So we're going to right click on our DAO and say add class, and we're going to call it app DAO and say add. We need to make this a public class, and what we need to do is we're going to create an interface here. Now we're talking about these interfaces down here. And we'll get to interface. So we're going to do public interface app DAO. And what that interface is going to contain, it's going to contain methods from our DAO. So instead of people calling this class, the class methods are going to call the interface instead. I won't get too into what interfaces are as far as the definition. I will tell you, interfaces continue to boggle me from time to time. And even those who are well versed in C#, who are maybe watching this video, maybe saying he's not using interface the right way. Please, sir, please, ma'am, put constructive criticism in the bottom of the video. So, excuse me. So what we're going to do is we're going to create at least 4 different methods based on our requirements here. We're going to create an add, remove, and an update, or add, delete, and an update method for our data. So let's do that real quick. Let's just stub out some methods here for that. So we're going to say uh, we'll say public void. We'll make them void. Voids don't return anything. They just do the work. Public void create table, data table. Okay. We're going to say public void add data row. That's going to add, let's call it add record. Add record. That's going to add records to our table. We're going to say public void update record. And then we'll have one that's called public void delete record. Okay. And then I believe in there I have one that's called that deletes all records out of a table. That's like our nuclear option one there. So let's create our data table. And actually what we're going to do is we need to up here now create our interfaces, our interface methods. So we're just going to copy that, excuse me, paste that in there, copy that, and paste it in there. Or you can type it out, void update record and void delete record and void delete all records. There we go. Save that. So now over here at the top, we can now inherit our iapp.dao and call it DAO like that. And you'll notice that at the top we have a using that popped up right away for us. Let's do this. Let's get rid of some of these usings over here because they're just unnecessary. There we go. Now in our constructor, we're going to our constructor area. We're going to make it a static main form, and we're going to initialize our DAO in here. Now these are constructors, and what this is basically when I say give me a new instance of the main form class, it's going to call these particular methods and it's going to execute the code in there right away. Over here, we can do the same thing over here. We can say app.dao have it an empty constructor. Now, by default, when you create a class and you create a new instance of that class, it automatically has an empty constructor kind of like this in there. So you don't have to do this line here. So I'm not going to do that line right now. But over here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say this.da. Oh, I need to make this a static variable and say DAO, this.dao equals new app DAO. And you'll see this, it'll say something about I can't make a static class there, right there. It can't be an instance qualified with a type name here instead. So I got to get rid of this on there, and that'll be fine. And then this says, hey, you're missing a cast here. So it says you can't convert appDAO to iAppDAO, like that. So let's go over to our appDAO, blah, 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 public interface, public interface. I think I've got this in the wrong spot here. Actually, let's do this way here. Instead of making it static, let's make it private. And it does not like that. Object reference private. And an explicit cast, blah, blah, blah. Let me take that out of there. Let's see what happens when I move it down here. It likes that because it's not, well, no, it doesn't like that. Well, let's see what I did before here. You can always revert to see what you did in other stuff here. Nope, that's the wrong thing here. Let's go looking in here. Where did I stick that at? That's the right one here. Go to application. Oh, I'm in the wrong one here. I need to go into here. And I need to go to the right branch. And I need to go to the main form, which is here. Static list form. Static iApp public static iAppDAO. That'll make that class a static app class. I think I made that other class a static class. Let's see here if I did or not. Oh, that's why. Okay, so the reason why that's happening is I have to inherit from my interface iAppDAO like that. Save that. If I go to that main form, I can move that back up here now. There we go. So once I create this static DAO, I don't have to reinstantiate it. It's going to stay open. It's going to, you know, through the life of my program running. I don't have to recreate it each time. So now, since I've created it where I have up here and here, down here, all I have to do is say DAO dot, and I've got access to all of those methods there. That's one benefit of using an interface. Okay, so here my daughter and her plan. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create our data table and call it and give it a name. So data table is just like any other table that you have. What it is it's a table with columns and rows, and going to create that based off of what we have in our requirements here. So we're going to create a column called item name, item quantity, tax, and price. So let's do that in our DAO class. So in our create data table class, I'm sorry, in our create data table method in our app DAO class, what we're going to do is create a new data table. So right away, what we need to do here is we need to change the return type of this method from a void to a data table, like this. Because we want to return a data table. And so now we're going to say data table. So we're going to use explicit variable creation, property creation here. And we're going to call it just data table. So we'll use the suggestion there. We'll say equals new data table. And we're going to give our data table a name. So if we click down, we can give it a name. So we're going to give our data table a name. So let's call it items. Like that. Now we need to create columns for our data table. So we're going to call this data table. We're going to reference this new data table method object here and say data table dot columns. Well, actually, it's going to be new columns and add.
Okay, baby, that's good.
And then what we're going to do is if you click down, you can create the data column, and then we want to have the type of data column like that. So that is the signature of the method that we want to use in this instance. So we're going to call our first column item name, and we're going to give it a comma. We're going to use the type of keyword, and it's going to be a string, which means that it can take alphanumeric data, letters and numbers. We're going to do this again. Instead of doing all that typing, let's just copy that line. There we go. And instead of this one being name, we're going to make this one price. We're going to make this one quantity. And we're going to call this one taxable. Now, obviously, since we're dealing with a price here, we want a decimal, because we're going to have to do addition, multiplication, subtraction, and division on that maybe. Quantity is going to be a short. And what a short is it's a 16-bit integer. So it can have values up from negative 254 to 55 to positive 255, I think. And then this taxable is going to be a Boolean.
Excuse me. My hair's not right yet.
And then the next thing we're going to do is we've got our data table created, an empty data table. Now we're just going to return the data table. So now, let's save our work. Come over here to main form. And in our logic up here, we need a data table on this side so that we can mess around with it in this class. All this method does is it creates an empty table and gives us an empty table. All of the work is going to be done on this in this particular class, in our main form class, as far as moving data around from the user interface to the DAO. So over here we need to create an empty data table as well. and we'll call it item data. And then down here in our static, oh, let's make this static up here too. Down here in our static, we're going to say item data equals new data table. And then what we're going to do is populate our data table. Now we have to do this step here. And actually, no, we don't have to do that step now that I think about it. What we can do is we can come over here and we can just say DAO dot create data table. And what that should do is it should create a new data table and return the data table to us. So let's see what happens here. I click start. It should debug on that line there. And if I hit F10, we have an empty items table there. See where we have our, we're going on the table name, there's our items right there. And then if we hover over that and click down, we go into columns, we should see 4 columns in there. See, I counted 4 columns, the results, and here's our 4 columns in there. And of course, the rows is going to be empty or 0 because we haven't added any data into the rows, into our table. So we've got that part created. So now, and this will only fire off one time at the beginning of our code, so we don't have to do this, any of this part here again. We can just reference these now in our code here. The other thing that we can do is we can initialize our data table columns to have empty variables in them, but we're not going to worry about that because we don't want to add empty rows with empty data into our data table. Not quite yet. So let's see here. So we've gone over some inheritance here. We created a couple of handler methods here. We created a worker method here. That's a handler. We created a worker method here that's initializing some variables or initializing the properties of our objects on our form. And then finally, what we're going to do is we're going to, in this particular one here, do I have that debugged? I do. 5, that one. Is, let's see what happens when we try to add some logic to actually add data into, well, no, let's handle our buttons here first here. No. We'll handle these last. We'll do the add first as well. Let's exit that. I'm trying to think of how I want to handle that aspect of it though. Do I want to? I may as well. So some might say this is a bad idea to do. I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway because it's just easy. I don't want to be lazy. No. I'm not going to do that. So what I can do is on our add item, I will down here. Actually, let's do this real quick. Let's do some to-dos so we don't forget anything here. We already got that there. Our close form is pretty much acting like we want it to. Let's create the rest of our handler methods here on our main form. So let's click that one, X, and move him up to here. And save. Let's exit there. And move him up to here. And the last one is this one here. It's X. So I'm hitting Control X to grab that. And move him up to there. We've got add item already. We need that one. And this one here. So Control X and move them up to here. There we go. So we've got all our handlers created, even though they're not really doing anything yet. Let's close this DAO here. So in our remove item, click, what we want to do is we're wanting to click call DAO dot delete record. That's what we're wanting to do. And in update item, we're going to do DAO dot update record. And we don't have any load or save list logic yet, or share. Our close form is kind of hashed out already for now. We're going to add some changes to it, but and then we're also needing to do a to-do here. So let's work hopefully on this one. Then let's see the topics that we needed to talk about a little bit here. We talked a little bit about data tables already. I talked a little bit about classes. I'll mark that one as a yellow. No, not as a yellow. Mark it as a green. We kind of talked about it. No, not that color green. I'll make it a purple. We talked about constructors already. Talked a little bit about interfaces. Alrighty, I've been talking about this kind of nonstop here. So the next thing we're going to do here, and let me check where I'm at on time here. It's been an hour. So I'm going to stop this video, and what we'll do is we'll pick up in the next video.